Hey guys, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me. Um, I want to introduce everybody to the two of you. Ben and Matt, you are both PJs, pararescue jumpers with the Air Force. And for those unfamiliar with what PJs do, PJs are, they're basically Rambo paramedics who jump into enemy territory if necessary to rescue downed pilots and help with other things as well. Rescue people, but you are combat medics on steroids. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a very nice way of putting it, but I'll take it.
Thank you. So let me tell you guys how this all started. A friend of mine, her sister-in-law is an ER doc in New Jersey. And as we do with our friends and our family, we text them and say, "How are you doing?" I'm going to read you her response. This is her exact text back to her sister-in-law. My days are filled with fear, sadness, despair, helplessness, and death. It's unreal. It's like a nightmare. It's shocking, like you cannot catch your breath because someone else is dying or critically ill, and you have no time to acknowledge and process what's happening around you, or even no time to fully exhale. It's draining emotionally and physically. Even on my day off, I'm stressed out about the next shift and exposing my family to the harm through me. I feel like I'm just holding my breath and I can't exhale. All I do is shallow breathing. When I heard this, my heart sank. And I started to realize that what those on the front line are dealing with and have been dealing with is nothing like they've ever experienced before, both in the amount of death that they're seeing and in the pace of operations. And it occurred to me that it's much more like combat medicine than it is like civilian medicine. And so I figured, as a way to try and help those on the front lines who are dealing with this and who have dealt with this, and we know that there are mental health struggles that go along with this kind of pace, to reach out to people who are much more familiar with what combat medicine looks like and feels like, with the hope that we can give them something, some coping systems, mechanisms. So I guess that's a good place to start. One of the things I also know that I've started to learn about civilian medicine is that asking for help is really a sign of weakness. And most of them believe that you show strength and you just muscle through it and you stay mission focused. And there seems to be a lack of resources. They've never been taught how to deal with the trauma that many of them are suffering. So I guess my first question is it the same in the military? Is it different in the military? How are you trained to deal with that insane pace of both death and stuff that you might be dealing with around you?
It starts off, I think, for us is starts in the pipeline. So our training is extremely stressful and definitely trains your mind to address things in situations like that. And we know in the civilian world, unfortunately, that's not how it is. You go to college, you go to nursing, med school, and kind of get thrown to the wolves at that point. But we're lucky enough to have all this training. But it comes to when you're out of that training and it's real life, finding your group of people, if it's your teammates, if it's fellow doctors and nurses and people going through the same thing, a lot of times you can find a lot of comfort in them because you can relate to them. That's what I think I use, and Ben may use the same thing, but that's something that is extremely useful for us.
Yeah,
So
for
go ahead,
me,
Ben, sorry.
yeah, it's the level of trust you have in your teammates. Like, so the pipeline definitely builds upon that. You're with people who've gone through something for 2 years before you even go out and start practicing your trade. So that's a little different. But when we do deploy, everyone has their kind of coping mechanisms. And like for me, it's being able to talk to my teammates. Like if I see something terrible or I do something that's like little psychologically jarring, I won't go call my family, not because I don't trust them, just because they won't understand really what I'm going through. And I kind of had that when I was going to paramedic school, like with a significant other. They didn't understand the trauma of like death and experiencing it on the regular. And so when you have like a team that you really trust, that you're meshed with real tight, it's easy to go talk to anyone. It doesn't have to be the whole team. It can be someone that you trust on the team, someone you get along with. And I think that we always on our team have a very good understanding that it's okay to show weakness and be like, hey man, I'm having a really difficult time right now. Even if it's like a family matter, like I'm going through divorce, or if it's in combat, like, hey man, like I need to call you, like a little frazzled after this last event. Can we talk about it? And like, it's okay, because everyone, I think they want to be invincible, but that's not possible. Everyone has fear. Everyone feels things. You're human after all. And so once you acknowledge that, being able to let down your wall a little bit with somebody and talk about it in a realistic manner is more helpful than just kind of stowing away. Because it's really easy to just go into your room after like an operation and just sit there and like listen to music, and like music makes you depressed sometimes. It's sad lyrics all the time, you know, pops up, but like that pops up, easy to isolate. I don't think that's the healthiest way to deal with it. But I dealt with stuff like that, and then I found it's better just to go talk to people, be around a community, for sure.
Can you dispel a myth? I think people in the civilian world think that the military, that you compartmentalize your emotions, you mission focus, you do your thing, and like you don't, like, well, the question is, the military knows that you're going to have to deal with that at some point. And what have you learned? Is it better to wait until you get back home when the emotions flood in and then you seek the help, or you're supposed to seek the help all the time throughout the process?
It depends. So yeah, I've done both, and my last deployment to Afghanistan I think was better for me, because after everything happened, I would talk to somebody immediately about what happened. I wouldn't say like necessarily how I was feeling. I would just describe the situation at least, so someone else, I could just talk to them about it, like, and that helped me a lot. And yeah, I don't think it's healthy to just let it build up. Obviously, during the mission, you're not going to just start getting emotional, like
Of course.
mass casualty, for example, or something of that nature. You just do the most good you can for the most people, and people will die. You have to understand that. As long as you get the preparation mindset, I think is the most important. So like, you go into the situation understanding that you can't save everyone, or that people will die. It's just the nature of the beast. And then when you come out of it, give yourself a little breather time, relax. I like to always take notes, like almost a journal, when I'm done with something, just so I can remember it fully, because your mind will alter what happened, even if it's like a few days after. So I like to have that for me, my personal thing, just like how I actually felt after it. And then I will go tell somebody what happened. And then as the days progress and I'm feeling kind of weird about it, I'd always have someone I can call. Usually it's a teammate, not necessarily a psychological counselor, until they're helpful. Like when you get back home station, talk to them. But when we're out, like deployed, it's definitely just a team member that you talk to. So,
Matt, what skills are you taught or have you developed? How, because you're medics, you're combat medics, you're not psychologists and psychiatrists, and yet, as Ben's explaining, you're going to each other and asking for help. What skills have you learned when somebody says to you, "I'm hurting, I'm struggling today"? What do you do when somebody does that?
Well, the thing is, I think during deployments, like every situation is so dynamic that none of them relate. There's definitely aspects that do relate, but for the general thing, it's always different. So I think a huge thing of talking to one another is you just need to be a good listener. Let them talk it all out. A lot of times that's all they really need, is just to talk it all out. And then I try to minimize what I say to them, because they know what happened, and they're just using me as an outlet, and I'm happy to be that outlet. And again, like, we're no professionals, and we usually just kind of listen and talk, and then kind of advise them like, hey, if you need to go to a professional, like, we can get that for you. But sometimes just talking about it, to, again, what Ben said, is talking to someone you trust. That's a huge thing that can relieve a lot of stress. And I think that's something we can relate to with the civilian medicine, because it is in that ER room. We've been in a few of them. It's a team dynamic every time they go into a shift. That's a tool they can definitely use.
The thing that hurts me when I hear about it is that the culture has developed in civilian hospitals that asking for help is a sign of weakness. How do you teach people that it takes, like, that it's the opposite? Mm-hmm. That strength comes from asking for help. Like, how did you learn that? I mean, you came into the military, it's all the machismo and bravado, to learn that you can cry and ask for help is actually the right thing and the strong thing to do. Did either of you have sort of a moment that you sort of, like, a light bulb went off? You're like, that's not going to work for me.
I think there's been times that an event has happened, and a lot of times I would kind of replay that event and see what I could have done better and what I could have fixed. And something that I used was in the military, you can talk to people who have a little more years on in the career field, and talking to them and seeing how they coped with it and how they learned and how they attacked that problem. I definitely took a lot out of that with talking to people who have dealt with it and how they cope with it, and then using those techniques and skills and applying it to myself. I think grief and dealing with stress like that, it's always changing. It's never the same, and you always got to fix your coping techniques because you're always going to be in a different spot. Next time I come around that problem is going to be a different part of my life and different aspects and priorities that I'm going to have to face. So again, it's going to be hard to kind of push through that wall, but I think a lot of people are aware of themselves where it's like, you know what, I do need some help. And we just need to get the message out that, you know, talking about what happened is not a sign of weakness, and asking for help is, like you said, shows more strength than weakness in that case.
One of the questions I got when I asked doctors and nurses and other frontline medical staff and first responders to please send some questions, knowing that I was going to be talking to you. A few of the questions I got all dealt with feeling overwhelmed. How to control the feeling of I can't keep up or I'm drowning. And it's not just necessarily work, it's also financial problems that are now showing up, and the horrible stress of am I going to infect my family? You know, how do you deal with the feeling of being overwhelmed? How do you bring that down?
Well, personally, I don't want to pretend to understand everybody's plight because I'm not them. But for me, what's worked for me, I'm not saying it worked for you, but if it does, it's awesome. We get taught this too. It's just one step at a time. So like whatever your target is, just bring it back a little bit. So if you're thinking about 8 things, of course you're gonna get overwhelmed, and you can't do all 8 at once. You can't multitask. The human mind is just not capable of it. So what we do is we just, hey, if you have to bring it back, what 2 things can you do? Or what 1 thing can you accomplish? Then you do that, move to the next. And that's the best way to deal with it. Because if you start trying to just think about everything that's coming down on you, you're going to fry yourself quickly. For us, it's like we call it the 1 meter target, or just, go 1 foot at a time, 1 foot forward. Just that's what it takes to get through it. Then you can like look forward further after that if you kind of figured it out.
Great advice. So make the list smaller.
Yeah.
One foot in front of the other. I'm going to share a question here I got from a police officer. My police agency in California lost an officer to COVID-19 last week. What advice do you have to show other officers on the front line that we in management support them and understand the risks they are placing themselves and their families in? This is a great question. How do leaders respond when they're not on the front lines to show that they actually do care about the people who are facing the danger every day?
I think you can just start off if the leadership in that position can definitely, you need to show definitely compassion towards them of, hey, you know what, like a brother in arms has passed away, especially during this pandemic, and just reach out a hand. Definitely don't lose contact with the men who aren't in the ranking spot, but reaching out and showing compassion and offering help, I think is going to be a huge goal for them to do, letting people be an outlet, because again, people are probably going to keep it inside, and then that's when mistakes are happened, when they really shouldn't be happening. So
is there can you, obviously you've had senior folks come down and check in on you guys. Is there a way to start that conversation? Are there things that can be said that make you shy away and feel disingenuous, and there are things that actually draw you in, or is any effort well received?
Yeah, it can feel patronizing at times, no doubt. Like if someone comes up to you after something's happened and it's leadership and it's kind of like, oh, they're just showing up now. I think you have to start that leadership before this kind of stuff happens. I think that's an organizational thing where if you're an organization that doesn't put people first, and now you suddenly want to start doing that, your people will find it disingenuous. But if you've always been in an organization that has your people's backs, that like this is simple things, like when we have someone who has a newborn, we all get diapers for them just out of our own pockets. It's not necessarily we have to, it's because we want to, because it's a leadership philosophy. Like, hey, the people matter. the people are more important than making money for the organization or completing, X, Y, and Z. So I think if your organization isn't there, you should start focusing that. And if it is already there, just kind of focus that lens, like, hey, we're here to help the people because the people matter for our organization. Here's how we're going to do it. Providing services for them, make time off if they need it, stuff like that.
Here's an interesting question, which is how does somebody speak up for themselves? This one says, how do I speak up for myself? Not just during this pandemic, but outside of that as well. How do you I've been trying to be the leader I wish I had for my coworkers, but I'm struggling because of my direct supervisor hasn't once come to our area to witness for herself what we're doing and asking how we're doing. So somebody who maybe leadership isn't there for them, they want to fill that role. Any advice?
I think they would need to, obviously, if they're kind of caught in the middle with a direct supervisor over them, but they're still supervising other people, you have to be the rock for the people underneath you, and really be there for them. But if you're a supervisor to other people, you need to make it your due diligence to go to that higher supervisor and be like, hey, we are struggling, and including myself, and we need your help, or we need you to do something and act for us. Because it's going to be tough for them, but you got to remember why you're in that supervisor position, and that's because you have the skills to represent other people to higher leadership. So passing that up is something that can be scary, but it's something that needs to be done. And remembering why you're in that position may help you to that.
I had a couple questions about compartmentalizing emotion. 12 hours on, 12 hours off. How to use the 12 hours off to heal a little bit, but also, people who are suffering extreme stress at work, how to avoid bringing it home. And one of the questions was, I'm learning to compartmentalize so I don't stress out at home. But then the question is when to deal with it. So the question is, how do you deal with the trauma while also protecting your family from what you're going through? And I don't mean necessarily transferring the virus, but just the high stress that you're trying not to bring home.
It's important to have your family and significant others understand, because compartmentalizing only goes so far. I did that coming back from deployment, and then I had like a breakdown on vacation with my family, and like clearly compartmentalizing didn't work. It only goes so long before it's all going to come out as like a steaming kettle. So you have to, at some point, you don't have to give them everything, right? That's because it's not all or nothing, but maybe try to explain some of it, because their significant others, they do care about, or at least I hope they do. And being able to at least just give them snippets that they'll understand, kind of broken down, not everything. Don't have to be like, I saw like this many dead bodies, but like, hey, I dealt with this today, and it's affecting me emotionally. If I'm off a little bit, I'm sorry, but I just want you to understand that I still love you. I think that's the best way to deal with it, because I didn't do that, and I had to do that explanation. And it's almost selfish to keep it to yourself and not try to share it.
I love that it's to feel like you don't want to burden your family is actually a selfish disposition. They love you, they care about you, give them the honor to take care of you. And as you said, for those who understand what you're going through, to report out all the detail because they understand, and to do a cleaner version for family, but you still get that reporting out. I think I'm finding that very interesting. The need to just not necessarily unload how you feel, but just simply reporting the facts of what I dealt with is part of the coping, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
In some cases, in some states and many hospitals who've been overwhelmed, the pace is slowing down. But one of the things that I've been made aware of by friends in the military is that sometimes the calm is more dangerous than the storm. And I've heard stories of folks who come back from combat, and sometimes months later, the emotion floods in because they haven't dealt with it. And because they've been so mission focused that when it's all quiet, and people don't understand, because rationally everything's fine. You're home, you're not in combat anymore. Where is all this coming from? Are there some thoughts that you can share if the pace is slowing down for some of our frontline medical staff, what they can prepare themselves for if this flood of emotion shows up, what to do when it shows up, will it show up? Very curious as to your experiences and your thoughts.
I think something that is very similar between our job and the civilians is that, like you said, they're so mission focused for months on end. And now as it slows down, they start to get relieved and kind of come off that mission focus. And the hardest part, I think, for me as well is coming back to the US and people are around you that have no idea what just happened for your last 4 to 5 months while they're just living their normal lives. And you've just gone from a complete 180 of this combat high stress environment to now back to normal life. And people don't know and can't relate. Most people can't relate to what you've just gone through. So in the civilian world, again, it's all ramped up, but now you're kind of coming off and you're going back to your family. And, you know, people who weren't in the ERs and never got infected, they just are mad that they're stuck in their house, right? So it will come. I don't think it's definitely inevitable that they will come with these emotions, but you need to remember that what your mission was of, hey, I chose to treat these people and chose to be in this career field, and remember that mission, and remember that not everyone can do that job. So when you do get frustrated if these people are just complaining about being home, when you start seeing all these terrible things, remember why you're in that position, because these guys can't really handle it as much as you can.
That's fantastic. Ben, any thoughts on how they can mentally prepare for the flood of emotion that is very, very, very likely gonna hit them at some point as things slow down?
Yeah, like Matt said, it's easy to get angry at people. Like everyone catches themselves like, man, these people just don't understand like what we went through. Like they're out here just living their life, getting drunk all the time, or whatever. And it's not fair to do that to other people because, like we said, you do what you do because you have the ability to do it. Maybe they don't. So you're not better than them. You're just you. And just take that. And then when the emotions do hit, I think it's best not to be alone. I like to find other people I can hang out with if they're going to hit, or at least call. It's easier to be around in person, I think. And then they don't resort to substances like alcohol. It doesn't help. It's easier just to find a hobby, push the energy to something. We like to use working out. It's easy, it's free. So that's what just find a hobby.
So this is very interesting because the trauma is an energy buildup, and it's letting the energy out. I guess it's kind of the physical comparison to talking, right? Which is to somehow vent the steam, I guess.
Yeah. I know a guy who picked up soldering. That's cool. Not my thing, but I like working out a lot. Also working on watches. Some people like working on just whatever kind of fine detail where it requires a lot of mental brain power. It's kind of a nice thing that just it takes your mind off it too.
What about burnout? There's a huge fear now that a lot of doctors and nurses and other frontline medical staff and first responders, because the pace has been so high that they're going to burn out, drop out of the profession altogether. And the fear is that if we have a resurgence, we actually won't have enough people to cope. That we're going to actually have a dip in medical staff. I'm going to guess that it's the same. That there's going to be a repeating pattern here to the answer, which is a good thing. But how do we prevent burnout? Because these are, we keep calling them essential workers.
Two-sided issue. I think it comes from both the individual and leadership. So the hospital in general needs to figure out how to treat these people fairly and compensate them for the time they put in. Then a lot of people, even in our profession, sometimes you go through a lot of stuff and just ask, but you feel like they never give you your time back. And I think if any gesture of giving time back, whether it's, compensation of wages or just actual time off, which is hard to give sometimes, but, allowing that is helpful for people to want to stay in that career field. And for the individual, when you have time to relax, you better take advantage of it. Find out how to relax. Because I know people that just don't know how to relax, and I wish I could teach them, but it's just the thing you got to figure out on your own. Some people like to have tea before they go to bed, do the whole ritual. If that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do. Finding what is able to actually let your body relax, not just sit there and ruminate or sit there and just waiting to relax, because it's something it's truly something you got to work on. It's similar to meditation, just being able to mind.
I guess is another sort of thing that so many will have to deal with, which is right now, we call them heroes every day, and many of them, we're clapping them to go to work. That's going to end, and they're just going to go back to being doctors and nurses and frontline medical staff again. You know, the person right now who's cleaning hospital rooms is like the most important person in the world right now, and they're just going to go back to being just the person who cleans the room. You know, how there's going to be an identity issue, I imagine, where you go from being a hero to just being a doctor or nurse or somebody working in a hospital or first responder again. You know, that has to affect somebody.
Yeah, I think it needs to have self-reflection of why you joined in the first place, and not join the military, but join that occupation.
Sure, that profession, sure.
No one predicted that this pandemic was going to come, and I'm going to be a doctor. So when a pandemic hits, I'm going to be able to be the hero, right? So taking that stress off once it starts ramping down, and taking that relaxation and really, really embracing it, and then do a little self-reflection of, you know, what you're thankful for, and how you will be thankful for those slow days when you go back to the ER, and understanding again, like, why I became a doctor was not to treat people in the pandemic. I will do that, and I am thankful to do that, but I'm also here to just be a doctor on the day-to-day basis, and not be a hero. I'm here to just help people. So just remembering that will pay dividends.
Here's a question that came in. What are aspects of combat medic culture, and what skills and practices of frontline medics direct leaders to hold each other up the most? How is their culture of leadership and interpersonal training different from, and maybe even better prepared for crisis than the rest of the medical culture? So I guess it's a nice broad question, which is, what is it about the combat medicine and your profession and military life that makes you actually better equipped than civilian hospitals and civilian medicine medical culture to deal with these kinds of things?
I think a huge thing is just the mindset alone. Training to prepare for the worst is what we do, and when that worst day comes, then we know what to do, and mentally we know how to attack it, and we practice our skills so many times that physically it's this second nature, but that mental battle is where I think we make the most money between the two groups. Having that attack pattern of, hey, I know this is going to come one day, and I know I am capable of addressing these things. I think that's what makes a difference. They have a day-to-day same thing in the ER, you know, multiple patients and everything. well. Sometimes it goes bad, but this flip of a switch, now everything is going extremely bad, is where it might be biting them in the butt of, hey, we weren't mentally prepared to take on this many patients and see this much death and despair, when I think the military does a really good job of mentally training their soldiers. So when that day comes, we know how to act.
Mm.
Yeah, the amount of training we get definitely speaks to performing, because when you're kind of in that fight or flight mode, you're not able to process and think like you normally would. So it all comes back down to what you were taught and how you react to it. So the amount of training we go through, I mean, think about it. We do over 2.5 years of training before we even get to actually touch a real patient. So that's where it's unfair almost for us, because we have so much preparation and mindset training, like, hey, this is how it's going to happen. And the training is usually like a lot more difficult than the patient you're going to get. Like it's like missing every single limb, you're just blood spurting everywhere. Like it's not quite as bad as you think. And so I think that's where we kind of benefit is, I know, at least in my experience, the stuff we've done is, yeah, it was pretty bad sometimes, but I can handle more.
Yeah. Yeah. Guys, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Any final words of advice that you'd like to share, especially for some of those who maybe haven't dealt with the trauma yet? Any final thoughts that or words of advice you want to impart?
I think just be thankful for being safe and healthy, and understand why you're doing this mission for the whole country and the world. And definitely the better days will come, and you got to make sure you're not afraid to reach out for help. It doesn't show a sign of weakness, and continue to push forward, because this will all go away and we will go back to our normal lives, and we'll be all happy people again, you know?
Ben?
Yeah, I think as long as you have the right mentality that you did the most amount of good with what you could, and that it's okay to feel the way you do. You're not weird or abnormal for feeling sad, feeling like almost lost or broken, that everyone goes through it. And that's okay. Like you're allowed to have that feeling. That's human. And just be glad you can feel that feeling instead of just not feeling anything, which is much worse, I think. So go and embrace those feelings and talk about them, because that's healthy. It's part of being human.
That's magical. You know, one of the things I've learned from spending time with folks like you is never cry alone. And if the emotions overwhelm you, then go find someone, you know, and if you see someone who's in a corner, go put your hand on their back, you know.
Definitely.
Guys, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. And thank you for the work that you do. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Simon.